What if I told you there's a city older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than the written word itself, lying just 4 meters beneath the surface of the Mediterranean Sea? A city so perfectly preserved that you can still walk its ancient streets, enter its houses, and see the layout of neighborhoods where people lived 5,000 years ago. This is Pavlopetri, the oldest submerged city ever discovered, and its story will change everything you think you know about ancient civilizations. For thousands of years, fishermen in the waters off southern Greece told stories about strange shapes on the seafloor. Stone structures that didn't look natural, patterns that seemed too geometric, too deliberate to be mere rocks. Local legends spoke of a cursed city, swallowed by the sea as punishment from the gods. But these were just stories, myths passed down through generations. No one took them seriously. Until 1967, when a young oceanographer named Nick Fleming decided to investigate. Fleming was conducting a survey of the Laconian coast when local villagers mentioned the underwater ruins. Intrigued, he donned his diving gear and descended into the crystal-clear waters of Ithaca Bay. What he found took his breath away. Spread across the seafloor, at a depth of just 3 to 4 meters, was an entire ancient city. Streets laid out in a grid pattern, the foundations of buildings, courtyards, tombs, all remarkably intact, as if the inhabitants had simply walked away yesterday. Pavlopetri wasn't just a collection of ruins. It was a complete urban plan, a snapshot of Bronze Age life frozen in time. The city covers an area of about 50,000 square meters, roughly the size of 9 football fields. But what makes Pavlopetri extraordinary isn't its size, it's its age and its preservation. Radiocarbon dating and pottery analysis revealed that this city was thriving around 3000 BC, during the early Bronze Age. That makes it at least 5,000 years old, predating the classical Greek civilization by more than 2 millennia. Think about that timeline for a moment, when Pavlopetri was a bustling port city. The Great Pyramids of Egypt were yet to be built. The Minoans hadn't yet created their palace at Knossos. Writing hadn't been invented. This was a world we barely understand, a prehistoric Mediterranean that existed in the shadows of recorded history. The layout of Pavlopetri tells us something remarkable about the sophistication of these ancient people. The city was planned with extraordinary precision. Streets run in neat perpendicular lines, creating rectangular building blocks. This isn't the random, organic growth you'd expect from a primitive settlement. This is urban planning, evidence of a society with engineering knowledge, administrative organization, and long-term vision. The buildings themselves ranged from simple rectangular houses to larger, more complex structures that were likely public buildings or the homes of wealthy residents. Archaeologists have identified at least 15 separate buildings, along with courtyards, streets, chamber tombs, and what appears to be a large rectangular structure that might have been a religious sanctuary or administrative center. One of the most fascinating discoveries at Pavlopetri is the presence of a massive building complex in the city center. This structure, larger and more elaborate than the surrounding houses, suggests a hierarchical society. Someone important lived or worked here, perhaps a king, a high priest, or a wealthy merchant. The building's position at the heart of the city, its size, and its complexity all point to a culture with social stratification and centralized authority. But Pavlopetri wasn't just a city. It was a port, a trading hub that connected the ancient Mediterranean world. The city's location was no accident. Pavlopetri sat at a strategic point along ancient maritime trade routes. Ships traveling between Crete, the Aegean Islands, and the Greek mainland would have passed through these waters. The harbor, now submerged but still visible in the underwater topography, would have been filled with vessels loading and unloading cargo. Olive oil, wine, pottery, metals, textiles, the goods of the ancient world flowing through this Bronze Age entrepot. The pottery found at Pavlopetri supports this picture of a thriving trade center. Archaeologists have recovered ceramics from the early Bronze Age through the Mycenaean period, spanning nearly 2,000 years of continuous occupation. Some of the pottery styles match those found in Crete, suggesting trade connections with the Minoan civilization. Other pieces show influences from mainland Greece and even further afield, evidence of a truly international trading network. What do you think daily life was like in Pavlopetri 5,000 years ago? Imagine walking through its streets at dawn, the smell of wood smoke from cooking fires, the sound of potters' wheels turning, weavers' looms clacking, metal workers hammering bronze, children playing in the courtyards while their parents prepared for another day of work, merchants arriving at the harbor, their ships laden with exotic goods from distant lands, fishermen returning with their catch, farmers bringing produce from the surrounding countryside. This was a living, breathing community. Families were born here, grew up here, fell in love, raised children, grew old. They had hopes and dreams, fears and ambitions. They worshipped their gods in the city's sanctuary. They buried their dead in the chamber tombs on the city's outskirts. They built their homes with care, planning for generations of use. And then, something catastrophic happened. The exact cause of Pavlopetri's submersion remains a subject of scientific debate. The most likely explanation involves a combination of factors, all related to the region's intense geological activity. Southern Greece sits in one of the most seismically active zones in the Mediterranean. Earthquakes are frequent and often devastating. The coastline has been rising and falling for millennia as tectonic plates grind against each other. Evidence suggests that Pavlopetri sank gradually over time, rather than in a single catastrophic event. The city may have been abandoned around 1000 BC, during the late Bronze Age collapse that affected civilizations throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Climate change, economic disruption, and population movements all played a role in this period of upheaval. Pavlopetri, already struggling with rising sea levels and perhaps damaged by earthquakes, was finally abandoned as its inhabitants sought safer ground. But the sea's work wasn't finished. Over the following centuries, continued tectonic subsidence caused the land to sink further. The streets where merchants once bargained, the houses where families gathered, the harbor where ships docked, all slowly descended beneath the waves. Sand and sediment settled over the ruins, protecting them from the destructive forces that would have eroded structures exposed to air and weather. In a strange twist of fate, the sea that destroyed Pavlopetri also preserved it. Unlike archaeological sites on land, which are subject to weathering, vandalism, and modern development, Pavlopetri has remained largely undisturbed for 3,000 years. The shallow, sandy seabed and the city's relatively sheltered location have protected it from the strongest currents and waves. The result is a time capsule of extraordinary completeness. When modern archaeologists returned to Pavlopetri in the early 2000s, they brought technology that Nick Fleming could only have dreamed of in 1967. Multi-beam sonar created detailed three-dimensional maps of the seafloor. Underwater cameras captured high-resolution images of every street and building. Digital photogrammetry allowed researchers to create virtual reconstructions of the entire city. The results were stunning. For the first time, archaeologists could see Pavlopetri not as a collection of disconnected ruins, but as a complete, functioning city. They could trace the path of streets, identify building entrances, distinguish between private homes and public structures. They could see how the city was organized, how people moved through it, how it connected to the harbor and the surrounding landscape. One particularly exciting discovery came from analyzing the city's orientation and layout. The streets align with astronomical features, suggesting that the city's builders had sophisticated knowledge of celestial navigation and seasonal cycles. This makes sense for a maritime trading culture. Accurate calendars were essential for timing voyages, predicting weather patterns, and organizing agricultural activities. The chamber tombs discovered at Pavlopetri provide another window into this ancient society. These burial structures, carved into rock and accessible through narrow passages, were used for multiple interments over generations. The practice suggests ancestor worship, or at least a strong cultural emphasis on family lineages and the connection between the living and the dead. What remains a mystery is the identity of the people who built Pavlopetri. We don't know what they called themselves. We don't know their language, their religion, or their political structure in any detail. The city predates written records from this region. All we have are the silent stones, the pottery fragments, the layout of streets and buildings. The people of Pavlopetri left no inscriptions, no literature, no written history. They are voiceless, known only through the physical traces of their lives. Yet those traces speak volumes. They tell us of a people with advanced engineering skills, capable of urban planning and large-scale construction. They tell us of a society engaged in long-distance trade, connected to a wider Mediterranean world. They tell us of a culture that valued order, organization, and permanence, building a city meant to last for generations. Pavlopetri also challenges our assumptions about prehistoric civilizations. We tend to think of the Bronze Age Mediterranean as dominated by a few great cultures: the Egyptians with their pyramids and pharaohs, the Minoans with their palace complexes, the Mycenaeans with their warrior kings. But Pavlopetri suggests a more complex picture, a network of smaller city-states and trading centers, each contributing to the cultural and economic vitality of the region. The discovery of Pavlopetri has inspired archaeologists to look more carefully at other coastal areas that might harbor similar sites. If one Bronze Age city can survive intact underwater, how many others might be waiting to be discovered? Coastal subsidence has affected many parts of the Mediterranean over the past 5,000 years. Every submerged coastline is a potential archaeological treasure trove. Recent surveys using satellite imagery and advanced sonar have identified dozens of potential underwater archaeological sites around Greece alone. Some show promising features that could indicate ancient settlements. Others remain enigmatic, their true nature unclear until divers can investigate more closely. The Mediterranean seafloor may hold secrets that will rewrite our understanding of ancient history. For now, Pavlopetri remains unique. No other underwater site from this period combines such age, such preservation, and such completeness. It stands as a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of our ancient ancestors, and as a reminder of the fragility of human civilization in the face of natural forces. The city is now protected as an underwater archaeological site. Diving is restricted to preserve the ruins from damage. But researchers continue to study Pavlopetri, using non-invasive techniques to extract every possible piece of information from this precious window into the past. What lies beneath other shallow waters around the world? What other ancient cities are waiting to be discovered? Their streets and buildings preserved by the same waters that claimed them. Pavlopetri proves that the sea holds secrets we're only beginning to uncover. 5,000 years ago, the people of Pavlopetri built a city by the sea, never imagining that the sea would one day claim it. They created streets and houses, raised families, conducted trade, worshipped their gods, and believed they were building something permanent. In a way, they succeeded. Their city has outlasted countless others, preserved in its watery grave, waiting patiently for us to discover its story. The streets of Pavlopetri are silent now, but they still have so much to tell us about who we were, where we came from, and the incredible journey of human civilization. Every stone, every pottery shard, every carefully laid street is a message from our distant ancestors, speaking across the millennia. reminding us that we are all part of the same human story, building our own cities, creating our own legacies, never quite knowing what the future holds.